welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In continuation with the series on economic sociology, we talk about Arjun Appadurai's book, The Social Life of Things, Commodities from Cultural Perspective. This is an edited volume published in 1986 and the significant work which kind of marks a transition shift from the way in which commodities and values was understood from economic and the point of production. It is an interdisciplinary work which brings in historian, anthropologist and archaeologist to understand how value is created in the process of exchange. So, in this part of the lecture, we will discuss the introduction which has been written by Arjun Appadurai. A 1986 introductory essay, Commodities and the Politics of Value, serve as the theoretical cornerstone for the influential edited volume, The Social Life of Things, Commodity in Cultural Perspective. The central argument posited is that economic exchange creates value. Value is embodied in commodities that are exchanged. Focusing on the thing that are exchanged makes it possible to argue that what creates the link between exchange and the value is politics, construed broadly. So, basically the author is trying to argue that in the process of exchange, and what are we exchanging? We are exchanging commodity, and what do we kind of want to take from someone is something which is a kind of more valuable to us, and it is not simply an individual desire to own that. It is a community desire, and in order to consider that commodity as valuable, there will something which has to be sacrificed. So, there is a politics in. So, that is what he is arguing, that in the process of exchange, value is created, and this value is kind of politically and geographically mediated. This foundational understanding of commodity as social things allows for understanding commodity like individuals, like person. So, he says that objects like human beings have social life, and that social life will then have its stages of growth and will finally come to an end. Now, how it emerges, its development and ultimately its end will depend on the context, and that is why it would be culturally different. Every culture will provide the context for the commodity to grow and then have a differential value. So, there are no fixed internalized value of commodity. These are external and they are kind of constructed through the life processes of the society. Appadurai endeavors to transcend Marxist influenced definition of commodity predominantly to capitalist modes of production, advocating instead for a dynamic and culturally attuned understanding. He begins by engaging with George Simmels' theories on value, critiquing purely materialistic conception of commodity and proposing a provisional definition of commodity as anything intended for exchange. And here when he talks about the exchange process, he talks about the path of exchange and how the commodity transits from one situation to the other. And here therefore, these kind of talks about the challenges, the negotiation that commodity undergoes. So, basically he talks about diversions and we will be talking about different types of diversions. So, he argues that actual circulation of commodity represents a shifting compromise between socially regulated path and competitively inspired diversion. So, there are certain rules, cultural norms through which the exchange takes place, but when there are certain challenges and negotiation, diversions as well happens. So, these diversions are crucial because they represent attempts to take things out of their accustomed paths, thereby potentially reconfiguring their value and social meaning. Now, these diversions can be broadly categorized into two types. One is competitively inspired or strategic diversion. What are the strategic diversions? These are individuals and groups within a society may strategically divert commodity from the conventional pathways to achieve specific social, economic or political ends. This often involves moving objects into different regimes of value or distinct spheres of exchange where they might command a higher price, confer greater prestige or serve new symbolic functions. Such actions are competitively inspired as they can be means to enhance status, accumulate wealth, or challenge existing hierarchies. For instance, an object typically exchanged within a restricted kinship network might be diverted into a wider market to realize its monetary potential, or a mundane item might be recontextualized to acquire ritual significance. These strategic diversions are significant because they highlight the agency of social actors within and sometimes against established economic and social structure. They reveal the inherent dynamism within any system of value where meanings are not fixed but are open to reinterpretation and manipulation. The capacity to successfully divert commodities often depends on an actor's social position, knowledge, and power, thus reflecting the politics of value at an individual or group level. This process can involve an object being removed from its commodity pathway, perhaps to gain value through scarcity or redefinition, and then re entering a pathway, potentially a different one, or at a later stage. The second type of diversion that Appadurai talks about is institutionalized diversion or enclavement. Beyond individual strategies, society also create more formal institutionalized mechanism for diverting certain category of things from unrestricted commodity circulation. Appadurai terms this phenomena enclavement. Enclaved commodities are those whose commodity potential is culturally hedged, meaning their exchangeability is deliberately limited or controlled. This is a political act aimed at preserving social orders, power structure, and cultural meaning by managing the circulation of symbolically potent objects. And he gives us an example of enslavement: royal monopolies and sumptuary laws. Historically, many societies implemented sumptuary laws or established royal monopolies over certain goods, particular types of cloth, precious metals, exotic imports. And why did they make it as an enclaved commodity? So that it was in restricted use and continue to claim a more higher value. Now, these measures, that is the enclavement or restricted access to these items to elite, thereby visually demarcating social status and reinforcing political hierarchies. Such goods functioned as coupons or license designed to protect status system, making their restricted circulation a direct instrument of political control. So, he talks about these two types of restrictions or diversions in the path of commodity exchange, and the next thing that he talks about is tournaments of value, arenas of intense value contestation and definition. A particularly potent manifestation of politics of value occur in what Appadurai terms as tournaments of value. These are FE. That means they are not merely economic transaction but highly charged social dramas where the definition, hierarchies and legitimacy of various forms of value are publicly performed, contested and potentially reconfigured. The key characteristic of tournaments of value include: number 1, restricted participation and status contests. Access to these events is often a privilege reserved for individuals or groups with existing power or those aspiring to it. Participation itself becomes an instrument in ongoing status contests. The second characteristic of tournament of value includes specialized currency. Tournaments frequently involve the exchange or display of specific tokens of value that may be distinct from everyday money or utilitarian goods. These tokens derive their significance from their role within the tournament itself. The third feature of tournament of value is high stake. What is at stake extends beyond more economic gain or loss. It encompasses not just status, rank, fame or reputation of actors, but the disposition of the central tokens of value in society, the very principle of which value is assigned and recognized are on trial. The fourth feature is consequences for everyday life. Although these tournaments occur in specialized times and places, their outcomes are always consequential for the more mundane realities of power and value in ordinary life. They help to establish or reaffirm the broader regimes of value that govern social interaction beyond the tournament. The next is in terms of understanding some of the examples of the tournament of value. Here he kind of gives us a wide range of examples from classical instances like the Kula ring to the more contemporary time. So, the Kula ring of Melanesia and the potlatch, which are kind of practiced in the North American Northwest coast, are the models, key models or examples used in anthropology to explain exchange system. Here he is trying to explain it in terms of understanding the tournaments of value, and besides Kula ring and the potlatch, he gives us the example of high stake art auctions, horticulture fashion shows, major media awards like the Oscar or Grammys, international book fairs, and even seemingly purely economic areas like the Chicago Grain Future Exchange. So, that is what he is transcending, or he is doing away between the binaries of the exchange and commodities, or the exchange between pre-industrial and industrial society. So, the Santa Fe Indian market, for instance, has been analyzed as a tournament where distinct orders of value compete for legitimacy and authority. These tournaments are critical social arenas where the link between wealth, prestige, knowledge and power are publicly displayed, negotiated and affirmed. They represent a concentrated and often dramatic form of the politics of value, revealing how societies construct and maintain the hierarchies of worth. Furthermore, the dynamics of tournaments of value can significantly influence commodity path and diversion. Next, he talks about the demand and its social discipline. So, following the exploration of how politics shapes the pathways and arenas of value, Appadurai turns his attention to the nature of demand itself. He argues that demand, far from being a simple reflection of innate human needs or the inherent utility of good, is a profoundly social and politically mediated phenomena. Appadurai critiques purely utilitarian or economist interpretation of demand. Instead, he proposes that demand is more accurately understood as the economic expression of the political logic of consumption. This perspective shifts the focus from individual rational calculation of utility to the social and cultural framework that shape desire and dictate what is considered worth acquiring. So, therefore, demand is not a natural force, but again a cultural and political construct, just as value. What people desire, how intensely they desire it, what sacrifices they are willing to make to obtain it, are learned, inculcated, and often manipulated through a variety of social processes. These processes are inherently political because they involve power relation, the definition of social norms, and the construction of aspirational identities. The adoption of new commodity, for example, often hinges more on a social consideration such as prestige identity affirmation or conformity to group norm than on purely technical or utilitarian advantages. And this we see it often today from our everyday life, that any kind of a commodity is purchased not because the people need it or there is a utility value, but because it's a question of your identity affirmation, or it is also a message of your group. So, you kind of belong to a certain elite class, you need to have in possession certain commodity. So, that is what is more cultural than economic. Therefore, understanding demand requires an analysis of underlying politics of consumption that gives rise to it. Next, he talks about luxury good and the politics of consumption. The social and political dimension of demand are particularly evident in the realm of luxury goods. These items, often characterized by rarity, high cost, and symbolic significance rather than their practical utility, play a crucial role in signaling status, power, and social distinction. The demand for luxury is highly susceptible to social and political manipulation precisely because their value is so heavily reliant on exclusivity and culturally constructed meanings. Elites throughout history have often sought to control access to or the definition of luxury goods as a means of maintaining social distance and reinforcing their superior position within the social hierarchy. The category of luxury itself is therefore not static or universal, but is a political construct, continually defined and redefined through social struggle over taste, access, and the symbolic meaning of goods. The circulation or deliberate restriction of luxury items thus become a powerful tool in the ongoing politics of value. The last section that he talks about is knowledge and commodity. Appadurai discusses the intricate relationship between knowledge and the valuation of commodities. He posits that politics of value is in many contexts a politics of knowledge, suggesting that information, expertise, and controlled narratives are fundamental to how commodities are perceived, valued, and circulated. Politics of value also means a politics of knowledge, implied that value is not solely derived from material properties. labor input, or market dynamics, but is significantly shaped by the information or misinformation that surrounds a commodity. Control. So, when we talk about this whole idea of what is a commodity, what is the value of a commodity, then the knowledge or what information you have around the commodity is more important. So, if there is a lack of information and you are not aware that it is a valuable commodity, then you may not kind of sacrifice so much to obtain it. And that is why he is talking that there is a political dimension, that it is something, this the whole idea of a taste of a particular commodity which belongs to a particular class is kind of based on the restrictive information that group has about that commodity. So, they are basically, commodities are not only in terms of having a utility, they are also signaling the message that there is a hierarchy and there is a control. So, and that is the reason why those who have kind of more knowledge are in access of more valuable goods. So, control over various forms of knowledge pertaining to commodities constitute a significant form of power in the economic sphere. This knowledge can include, number one, provenance, that is information about object's origin, history of ownership and previous context. Number two, authenticity. How authentic is that product? Now, knowing the authenticity of a product is again dependent on the information about, the knowledge about the product. So, it is again something which is accessible to the educated elite. People who are not aware about the quality or what material has gone into the production of the product are not able to consume. And if we look around everything, if we kind of label a product as more authentic, that is kind of the label authentic becomes a criteria for increasing the value of that product. Now, who are the people who will be aware of that authenticity? Are those who are having the required amount of information about that product. The third is quality and craftsmanship. Now, specialized knowledge required to access the technical attributes or skill embodied in an object. Now, again this commodity value depends on the amount of skill. Now, the skill could be manual or technical attributes. So, the more the skill it is, the higher the value of it is increases. Now, that information of how much of skill is utilized or how much of technical attribute is given to that commodity is also available with certain elite group, and therefore, the consumption of such skilled work or technical work is kind of restricted. Number 4 is in terms of understanding the consumption etiquette. Now, the consumption etiquette is in terms of the knowledge about the correct or socially appropriate ways to use, display or appreciate a commodity, which can itself be a marker of cultural capital. Now, when we talk about the cultural capital, which in terms of talks about kind of giving value to non-monetary goods. So, if knowledge is again something which is a privilege of certain. So, the more we kind of give value to a certain kind of product and we kind of consider it as correct for consumption, and many a time it is not only consumption, it is a question of display or in terms of kind of inheritance of certain product which would be kind of increasing or would be a labeling of your cultural capital, your consumption increases. So, that is the reason that Appadurai is kind of not limiting the understanding of commodity to the production process itself. How a good is produced is not only restricted in terms of the class divide, it is kind of also in terms of how from the production unit of production, it travels to the market where it would be distributed according to the taste or the cultural demand of that product, and that transition from distribution, exchange, creation of that value to consumption. So, we see that there is a kind of a complete life of a commodity which needs to be understood in order to kind of have a good understanding of what is a commodity, who are the people who are consuming it, what is the knowledge around that commodity. And from understanding just commodity, we are also talking about the political relation, the political power. So, some people have more power or influence over the commodity to kind of consume that, would kind of make it more valuable compared to those who don't. So, there is a kind of a entire holistic understanding that he is giving to us. So, when we kind of look into the work of Appadurai, that is the social life of things, we see that his work is providing enduring concepts for analyzing how value, meaning, and social relations are continuously constructed, negotiated, and contested through circulation, exchange, and consumption of material object in an increasingly constructed work. So, there is a kind of a marked shift when we talk about the work of Appadurai, and to kind of reassert that we are kind of doing away with the dualism, where we kind of understand production and consumption as part of parts. How a good is produced would also determine how that good is being circulated, where the good is being circulated, the knowledge around that commodity, and then again the consumption of material object is important. So, what we are consuming is not only in terms of how much of purchasing power we have, whether we can purchase a particular commodity or we cannot purchase, but it also goes around the cultural value of that product, the symbolic meaning attached to that product, and that is why Appadurai's work is kind of significant and an important contribution to the economic sociology. It is important to read his work to have a more good understanding of the arguments that he is making. With this, I come to an end of this lecture. Thank you.